I think we're gonna get started. Thank you for coming to our first listening session. This is gonna kind of take the place of our committees. So we'll have transportation items, we'll have engagement items, we'll have land use items. So it's gonna be kind of a mixed bag, but we're just trying to encourage more people to come and not have like multiple nights to have to plan out. So I want to start out to introduce our staff. We have Annie in the corner. She's not, close to us just because she's got some COVID in her family and she's being careful. So I appreciate that, Annie. And then our newest staff is Maria, and she is our community organizer, and she's going to be primarily working with our Spanish-speaking residents. So looking forward to doing lots of work with Maria. Hi, Bob, come on in. Good greetings. So we have two items on the agenda tonight. We have an update from the Purple Line folks. They're going to take the majority of our time, and then Chad from Habitat for Humanity is also here. They're looking for a variance to some rear yard setbacks, and they're looking for some support from the community on that. So Liz, Colin, looks like Craig's here too. Who would like to start?
Pass it on to Liz and Craig to start.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks. And hi, everybody. I think we're waiting for one more member of our team, but while we wait for her to hop on, I'll just kind of kick us off here. My name is Liz Jones. I'm the Outreach and Engagement Lead for the Purple Line. I also work on the Gold Line project. Thanks for talking to us again. I know we've been to your meetings before, and others connect with others through other community groups, and a lot of you folks have been involved in following the project for a while and all of our engagement activities and different goings on this project. Never a dull moment. So we appreciate the time with you, and definitely we'll look forward to connecting with you more often over the rest of this new year, 2024. A lot of additional big changes for Purple Line. So I'll just go and call on our team, and while we wait for Allison, hopefully she's joining on while we are doing our introductions. So Colin.
Yeah, Colin Owens, Community Outreach and Engagement Coordinator.
And Craig.
Good evening, everyone. Craig Lamoth, Purple Line Project Manager.
And just like magic, we have Allison. We all finished our team introductions, Allison. So if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Allison Luongo. I'm one of the consultants on the Purple Line project team on the engineering and design team.
Allison knows all of the technical details. So feel free to pull out your toughest questions. And I think I think we're ready, Allison, if you want to get the presentation pulled up. So again, thanks all for having us. We really here today to give an update on what we're calling the route modification study. So really the evaluation of running Purple Line along Maryland and White Bear Avenues. And what does that mean? What does that look like? A lot of things to explore, a lot of conversations that we have been having and will continue to have, and just want to give you an update on where we are at with that process. Want to also we have a few concepts to look at, so it's very high level concepts and some visualizations on what implementing bus lanes for Purple Line might look like on Maryland and White Bear. So we'll go through some of those images, but really want to spend the bulk of our time here. We have drone video footage, so we're kind of looking to do a virtual walkthrough of part of the corridor. And so really we'll have footage from the drone that Allison will walk through, and we can kind of see what we're talking about as if we were out on the corridor, knowing that even though we have a mild winter, it's still chilly out, so not the best conditions to be walking and rolling around the corridor right now. We did walk and roll with many folks earlier this fall, and we will likely have other events and opportunities to get out physically on the corridor once the weather warms up, but wanted to pilot. So this is the first time we're doing this. This drone footage is new, so hopefully it all works out with all of you to just help answer your questions and help us get any information or feedback from you on the Maryland White Bear Avenue corridor in the D2 district. Any questions, comments you might have that will help our analysis and evaluation of what Purple Line might look like in this area. All right, so we can go to the next slide. And the next slide, and then we'll talk a little bit after we go through the drone footage, talk a little bit about our next steps and continuing to engage with you folks in the community as well. So many of you have seen this image earlier this year. The Purple Line project began looking at Maryland and White Bear Avenue as an alternative route to using the Bruce Vento Trail corridor. And so the lighter purple, thicker line that hopefully you can see here is this study area. So this is just a high level line on a map, and that's our focus area right now. Last year, and even earlier in the year, our previous route modification, which we're calling phase 1 and phase 2, that included the Bruce Vento Trail corridor and possible connections to Vadnais Heights or Century College, show that the analysis showed to us that we would only qualify for federal funding using the Bruce Vento Trail if we stopped at Maplewood Mall. So we're going to, on this new corridor, first get all of our data and technical evaluation and engagement for Maryland to White Bear Avenue, stopping at Maplewood Mall, so also running on Beam Avenue. And then we will explore what potential further connections might look like as well. So that will be more conversations and engagement that would happen later this year. And this is a high level schedule and has shifted a little bit. So earlier in the summer here, so really we started this effort in the spring. So as far as these projects go and planning and evaluation and engagement, we're still pretty early in this process and we're trying to get a lot of information compiled and talking to folks. Just it's a year plus, seems like a long time, but really for this effort it's short and how our planning works. So many of you, we talked to many of you in the community earlier in this summer. So when we started this effort to look at Maryland to White Bear in the spring, there were a lot of new folks, new corridor. Obviously Maryland to White Bear is very different than the Bruce Vento Trail. So we went out, did a lot of engagement, talking to folks. Our team door knocked to around 200 businesses in the area. We just talked to a lot of people, letting folks know who we are, that we're looking at this corridor and just trying to get people involved. Later in the summer, we did some engagement on station locations, and we'll have an image of that and a few slides here. We're just getting feedback on some proposed station locations that would be along Maryland and White Bear Avenue. And now, and like I said, these buckets have shifted a little bit, but we are now looking at what does bus only lanes, what do these concepts look actually on Maryland and White Bear Avenue? And so we'll have, we're starting to have these conversations now, and we will continue kind of through the mid-April timeframe. We'll have kind of a formal comment period where we'll actually have layouts and station locations and the bus lane configurations for folks to take a look at and react to. And then later in the summer this year, we'll do a comparison of Maryland to White Bear and Bruce Vento Trail. Next slide, please. So this map is our high-level station locations that we went out and did community engagement on this summer here. And so what we really, our starting point was really the current Route 54. And so we're calling these green little beans. We're more high level and just getting feedback from folks. And once we actually have the layouts, we'll have specific station locations for folks to react to as well later this spring here. The spacing is within a half mile, about 5-minute walk. A lot of these are a little bit closer or more than what a typical BRT line would have, but we wanted to, knowing that this is a really busy corridor, we wanted to have a starting point with all of these Route 54 stops. Go to the next slide. And really during that engagement effort, there was only one station that kind of rose out, that we received a lot of comments from folks in this neighborhood, that our Larpenteur Avenue station might be better served moving more towards Idaho, more towards Iowa. And so we dug in a little further with that. Really, the comments on that were regarding the Iowa high rise. That's between Iowa and Idaho there, as well as the future Gloryville development, and also still wanting to maintain access to the Hillcrest Shopping Center. And so from having more, we did a lot of specific engagement with the Iowa high rise. I'm kind of jumping around here. We can go to the next slide. So we wanted to talk to folks at Iowa High Rise and with the Gloryville development to understand from folks who live and work at Iowa High Rise, and also more information on the Gloryville development, if they, what their transit use was, if they felt an interest in, moving Purple Line closer to this complex and this development. And what we heard was overwhelmingly yes. So really supported the feedback from folks in the community who lived outside of the complex, saying that we should move closer to serve Iowa High Rise and future Gloryville development. Both folks who lived at Iowa High Rise.
Interrupting quickly, for
Sure.
those who aren't familiar with Gloryville, that's the Hafner site. So Gloryville is the developer who's been named as tentative developer status for that site. So for the rest of us, it's Hafner's. So sorry, Liz, thank you.
Yes, no, that's a good clarification. Hafner's, we were all calling it that, and now we've switched to Gloryville. So thanks for making that distinction. And I believe that Gloryville had, many of you have been chatting with the folks working on Gloryville, but we, as I'm sure many of you have learned, that it'll be a mixed use affordable housing with a grocery store and retail. So that's a really exciting, I know that land has been vacant for a while, and I think they're still planning to keep some of the food trucks implemented. So that's exciting. Would be definitely great to access transit as well. In addition to the Route 54, so Purple Line would primarily replace the Route 54 just in this corridor, and then the Route 54 would exist outside of the Purple Line route. But we've been having a lot of conversations about the other local routes. So the Route 64 would be one that would stay, and we're connecting the Gloryville folks with our internal Metro Transit team who's working on, who works on our current existing routes, and how Gloryville might incorporate Route 64 into that development as well, since there's Route 64 stop pretty much right at that site. But then shifting the Purple Line would provide much better access closer to Gloryville. And we also discovered that a lot of folks, while the main entrance into the Iowa high rise by vehicles is through Iowa, that folks walk and use their mobility devices in and out of the complex and throughout the community through Idaho. And there's actually, we're seeing more pedestrian traffic near Idaho. So we're looking at actually having what we're calling the Larpenteur station at Idaho. Go to the next slide. We did have, I think I mentioned earlier, some walking and rolling opportunities in the fall here with folks. So we received lots of good feedback and a lot of good conversations that we had. So you can see on the bottom left corner, we kind of chunked the whole Maryland and White Bear into 5 different segments and walked. So each segment was probably about a mile walk or roll. And just we're really helping the team collect more information on how folks utilize this area, where folks are traveling to, coming from, crossings, just any safety concerns, questions. So that was really helpful. We had a variety of folks, some folks who are really familiar with the project and were able to give kind of good specific feedback on potential access, or things like that, or other folks who are, new, just hearing of Purple Line, asking high-level questions about the project as well. Some of the main themes that we heard were a lot of folks interested in the more amenities that would come with a Purple Line. So the heated enclosures, real-time signs, with Bus Rapid Transit, you have your pay before you board and ticket vending machines, similar to light rail does right on the platform. And really that more reliable service with Bus Rapid Transit service that typically comes every 10 to 15 minutes. And again, the real-time sign allows you to not have to carry a schedule with you, and you know that your bus is pretty much coming every 10 to 15 minutes. There's been questions about nature impacts and how we incorporate wildlife into our plans. And so we have a pretty strong environmental process that we go through with both the federal and state governments to ensure that we are not negatively impacting wildlife or endangered species. So we had some good questions on that with folks who came out to these corridor walks and rolls. A lot of safety questions and concerns. A lot of folks mentioned that they witnessed a lot of accidents and a lot of concerns for pedestrian crossings and safety along both Maryland and White Bear Avenues. And some of those are certainly enhanced by folks with accessibility needs. So we've been hearing that loud and clear, as well as questions about safety on transit. And some of that folks were glad to hear about kind of going back to our station amenities. There are more infrastructure, more lighting. There are cameras, and so a little bit more safety in those better amenity stations as well. And then just folks are excited. We heard a lot of excitement for the Purple Line and on Maryland and White Bear, and folks wanting to access all of the many businesses in the corridor. So access to shops, restaurants, and various medical appointments as well. So we had a lot of good conversations in that regard. I'm going to pass to Craig now to talk through some of our concepts for bus lanes on Maryland and White Bear.
Thank you, Liz. Feel free to ask questions along the way or hold them to the end. I've got about a half dozen slides I'm going to get through here. So we have, granted, it may feel like a long time, but as Liz mentioned with that schedule, we're moving pretty quickly. And so we've gone from last summer, what I would refer to as a universe of different possibilities of being able to accommodate transit on the roadway. Basically ways we've done that here in this region and ways other regions have done that on their BRT systems. And so we really started with a large bucket of different possibilities. Actually, if you can go back a couple slides, I'm seeing slide 13 here. Oh, where's slide 10? Possibly hidden. So I will jump then to the slide that we've got here and go to the next slide if you would, Allison. I can start talking about we went through a screening process last fall to go through that bucket of different possibilities. We ended up using primarily subjective criteria with a little quantitative criteria to be able to get down to the ones that we thought held the most promise. And then we wanted to really spend a lot of time focusing on that short list of possible options, fully evaluating them, fully understanding them, so that we could take that information and those concepts out to the public, which this is part of that. But as was indicated by Liz earlier, sometime in the late winter, early spring, we are anticipating a formal public comment period where we'll have the concepts and the information that folks I think are interested in, which would be such things about traffic, property impacts, pedestrian improvements that would come with the different options, those type of things. We don't have all of that yet, but we will by late winter and spring. And so what I'm sharing here today is really the concepts that we ended last year with, which we broke the corridor up that you saw on earlier slides into Maryland Avenue segment, White Bear South, which is really Larpenteur and to the south, down to Maryland, and then White Bear Avenue North, which is Larpenteur to Beam Avenue. We came up with, for the short list of most promising options, really two different concepts for the Maryland and White Bear Avenue options, which I'll talk about here in a minute, and then two different options really for the White Bear Avenue North. They are not the same pair of options because the corridor really changes from Maryland to Beam in terms of its width of right-of-way, which really limits us on what we can and can't do within the corridor. Maryland and White Bear tend to be about 67 feet wide, White Bear south of Larpenteur, and then north of Larpenteur, it gets as wide as about 140 feet wide at Beam Avenue. So you can do a lot more with 140 feet of width compared to 67 feet of width. So down on Maryland and White Bear Avenue South on this image specifically, the first option that we're considering and evaluating are what we refer to as semi-exclusive side-running transit lanes. And that option here is reflecting that these lanes would be used by both transit and folks that are accessing driveways, both residential and commercial, making right-hand turns into those driveways, and then folks that are turning right at intersections. And so there actually would likely be more non-transit vehicles in this lane. So it's a semi-exclusive transit lane. It does provide speed and reliability for transit. And then what you're seeing in the middle of the roadway is one lane in each direction remaining for general traffic, separated by a paint line. And that would consume the entire 67 feet of width that we have for those two segments. North of Larpenteur, on that image furthest to the right, it's basically the same concept, but because, as I mentioned earlier, it's a little wider as soon as you get north of Larpenteur, we are able to add a center concrete median. And what that does is that restricts left-hand turns throughout the corridor. A lot of White Bear north of Highway 36 already is in this condition. So the big change would be for Larpenteur to about Highway 36, where there would be a continuous center median in that area. That helps limit the crossing of that transit lane. It also makes it safer for pedestrians throughout the corridor with that center median. Next slide, Allison. So this image here is showing the other concept for Maryland and White Bear south of Larpenteur. And it is essentially a 3-lane cross section and with one transit lane. The transit lane on this image is being shown going left to right, or for Maryland Avenue in the eastbound direction, and then on White Bear in the northbound direction. That is just for illustrative purposes only. We haven't completed the traffic analysis to know which direction would transit benefit the most from by having a semi-exclusive transit lane. So it could very well be in the other direction, then things would just shift around on these images. But that 3-lane cross section would be a lane in each direction for traffic with a center turn lane. And this is common in other areas of the city, minus the transit lane. The one thing that is not shown on these images, as we are now moving from these images to actually laying these concepts out on the entire segment, we're looking at introducing pedestrian refuges or medians in that center turn lane, particularly at intersections that do not have signalized intersections today or would in the future, to allow safer pedestrian crossing at those unsignalized intersections. There are areas of Maryland to the west of Johnson Parkway that are in this kind of condition. And then this image doesn't show any change on the north of White Bear, so go to the next slide. So the other option we're looking at for north of Larpenteur on White Bear Avenue, again, because we have width, is to actually put what Goldline is building, essentially. If you're familiar with the Goldline project, that's about 1.5 years from opening. That will be in its second year of full construction next year, going from St. Paul to Woodbury, is putting the concrete medians on the outside of the transit lanes. So essentially the transit lanes are fully exclusive. No other vehicles besides transit vehicles should be found in those lanes at any time other than emergency vehicles would be allowed to use them. And so this provides the best speed and reliability for transit of any option, which is why Goldline's constructing such a thing. And so that's the other option that we're considering between Larpenteur and Beam Avenue on White Bear.
Craig, we have a question on that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so with that, that exclusive transit option, with that transit lane center option, would that not be the most expensive option if I'm not, would that fall within the, because I understand that Gold Line is costing a little more than it was expected to. Is that also, would that also not push Purple Line in that same category?
I'm not sure where the expenses are on Gold Line, but for any of these options, what we are right now assuming with the very low level of design that we've done is that for this entire stretch on Maryland and both segments of White Bear Avenue, we are doing a full roadway reconstruction. And so it's essentially going to cost us generally the same with very little difference. Granted, cost estimates are one of the things that we're working on in addition to ridership as part of that technical evaluation that we'll have here shortly in a couple of months. But I would not suspect that there's going to be a whole lot of variability between the options cost-wise because we are reconstructing the entire road. Most likely from back of curb to back of curb, which means we'll be replacing and upgrading the sidewalks. Some places the sidewalks aren't great. They're not, they don't meet today's design standards. Along Maryland in particular, there are sidewalk segments where the plates of the sidewalks are lifted and are not accessible with wheelchairs or walkers or other mobility devices. All of that would be replaced as well. So generally should cost roughly the same for any of these things.
So this would be different than what the city or the county would generally do for repair, like a mill and overlay?
Correct. Yep, we'll have an opportunity here with a project like this to replace aging utilities that are maybe underneath, since we'll be tearing up the road bed to completely replace it. Right now, we are also assuming concrete, the entire roadway concrete. So that's what we are currently assuming, again, at a very low level of design.
And the city and county won't be asked to put any money into this?
The city, no. For in this region, the cities tend to not pay for anything associated with these projects unless they are wanting to do something extra. I'll give an example. I just mentioned utilities. So if there's a city utility in the street that's 100 years old, that if we're going to dig up the street, which is going to be more than half the cost, they may want to go in there and upgrade that to that water main or whatever it might be. They would then pay us to design and do that with city funds. The county is the local funding partner for this transit project. So right now the county is paying for all of the expense of this project. They will continue to do so until the federal government chips in their share, which right now is assumed to be about 49%. But the feds don't start paying into a project like this until we start construction. So the county front loads all of that, but the county would be paying for 51% of this project.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I think we've covered this slide. Before I turn over the tour, just to give you an idea, a month from now, you might start seeing that we will have, we're working on visualizations of the corridor, so ground level shots of before and after. We're also laying out the entire segments because it will change block by block what we can do and what this might look like as we apply these concepts. All those are going to be available. Actually, I'll mention here to this group for segments 3 and 4 north of Larpenteur. We did that with the Maplewood City Council in mid-December, right before the holidays. We had a workshop with them so that they could see side by side on a roll plot on a table what these concepts would look like for their city. We are planning to do the same with the Transportation Committee of the St. Paul Planning Commission. Right now, we're penciled in for their meeting on January 22nd. That's still to be confirmed, but we are right now expecting somewhere on either the 22nd or maybe a meeting in February. We'll be coming forward with roll plots of segments 1, which is Maryland, and segments 2, which is White Bear between Maryland and Larpenteur Avenue. So more detail to come quickly. With that, I'll turn it over to Allison unless there's any further questions for me.
Sorry, I was able to pull up the hidden slides if you still wanted to go back to those, or if you're okay with moving on, we can.
I think we can move on.
Okay. So, well, that's not pretty. The intention of this corridor tour is kind of to review existing conditions and set the stage for starting to visualize what this corridor could look like with changes, but it'll help you understand the context of some of the considerations that we're dealing with as we're developing concepts and narrowing down potential options. So we're going to start the tour. I'm just going to pull up another screen just because it'll be easier to play. And I am going to play this at 1.5 speed just so we can hopefully get through all of it. And I hope that it's not too laggy, but if it's making anybody motion sick, just let me know and we can slow it down, we can pause. And I can pause at any point if anyone has questions. Liz, Craig, if you want to interject, please do. And in the corner here, there's a map and the dot will move as we move along the corridor. So we're currently starting with one drone video that was taken last winter, and we're starting on Phelan Boulevard, just a little bit south of the Cook Avenue station. So as we come up Phelan Boulevard, you can see the Hmong Village building over here and the Cook Avenue station along the Bruce Bento Trail over here as we approach the intersection of Phelan Boulevard and Johnson Parkway. So the reason we're starting here is because this is kind of where the original proposed Purple Line alignment transitions to our White Bear Avenue alignment. Around this area, we're looking at alternatives for what happens at Johnson Parkway. The current proposed design from the original Purple Line has a bridge for the bus rapid transit to go over Johnson Parkway. And then there's a berm here behind the Phelan Cub. It'll kind of turn in a second. So right here, this berm is where the bridge would meet, but we're also looking at other alternatives for how the BRT traverses Johnson Parkway.
We do have a question here, if you can take it.
Yes.
Yeah, just so people know, your design for between Payne and where we were just looking up to Johnson Parkway doesn't look like what we're looking at. It has 2 extra lanes replacing the trail. Right
So yeah, if I back up a little bit,
there.
yeah, so
Up to that part, so people here know it takes out trees.
Yep.
It's not as safe a bike lane, puts it right up by the apartments, right through the edge of the drop-off site. It really makes the trail not a trail.
Not a trail, it's a sidewalk.
I'm just not sure people know that.
yes, thank you for the clarification. I might have skipped over that a little bit, but yes, what's happening on the corridor is there's a dedicated bus guideway, so an additional new road that'll be happening here, and the trail will be reconstructed alongside it. Still a dedicated separate facility.
But there will be four roads there, 2 for buses.
And a trail.
Barely. Not a
So-
quarter, like this is kind of Boone's event. I know it's District 2, but when people think it's the Judith Center Bike Trail, it's no longer gonna bulldoze it, that's not true. In that part, so, and then you can see it goes right behind people's condos, apartments there at Real Life Block. which people I've met aren't happy with.
They don't like buses going by their windows.
At midnight, no. So,
Okay, why don't we continue on?
but
Mhm.
so I just wanted to, yeah, let's get the
Yeah,
your
it's not
real
only,
here.
yeah.
And everybody's gonna have a different opinion.
Yeah.
But at least we have the facts here. So I realize.
Yep, so there are other alternatives. It's not set in stone exactly what the alignment between the Cook Avenue station and Maryland Avenue would look like. It could still go behind the Phelan Cub. It could go up Phelan or Johnson Parkway. It could go up Phelan Boulevard. It's not 100%. And it's being evaluated as part of this study. So I think there will be more on that in the next meeting. That's correct.
Wouldn't Cub and Aldi's want to stop for them? I mean, I'm not.
It's a lot to carry your groceries.
Yeah.
So that as we move past the existing berm, this is Maryland Avenue here, and I'm going to switch to the next video. So this drone footage was taken this fall, so it's pretty recent. And again, we have the map with the dot that will move alongside. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because we already saw most of this area. All right, so, oh, I need to back up just a little. Okay, so now we are on Maryland Avenue. This is where that berm that we were just over before, where it meets Maryland. And this, if the guideway still comes up this way, this would become a new signalized intersection to allow the bus to get on and in and out of the guideway here. So as we continue up Maryland this way, you can kind of see that the roadway typical section in the west part of Maryland is typically about a 5-lane section. So you have 2 through lanes in each direction and then alternating left turn lanes with medians in between or striped medians where there aren't turns. There's a signalized intersection at Clarence and there would be a proposed station platform at Clarence.
Which does.
Again, feel free to stop me if you have questions.
I have a question, or just a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that Walgreens isn't there anymore. It's totally empty. Why can't, like, I'm just throwing out the suggestion, using that as a site, make that the stop on Maryland? Because then you're gonna go down Prosperity, you got 2 banks right there, you got a medical clinic, and then they just keep going right down Phelan Boulevard. Then you don't need to build a bridge, which is gonna cost a lot of money. And you got this whole corner right now in Prosperity and Maryland that is in the northwest corner that's totally empty. And I think you're gonna, and it's a bigger intersection, so it's gonna be easier to do the bus there and have a bus stop there. Clarence is no bigger than this room, really. It's just a tiny little,
But they'll take the.
but, and I'm just, it's
they'll
just
take
a
the-
suggestion, but you got that whole northwest corner now on Maryland and Prosperity. And it's more accessible, because like I said, there's banks there for people to use. The doctor's clinic is right across the street. You got the BCA, and it's closer to Cub and it's closer to Aldi's than building a berm. But that's just my suggestion.
And the new apartment complex.
Pardon?
And the new apartment complex.
And the new apartment complex that's going right there that you see them building, yeah. So, I'm just throwing it out, do with it what you want, but I think it's an idea you really should look at and forget Clarence. Because
Well-
Clarence is too dang tiny.
There's already an apartment. Clarence has got the Dairy
Yeah.
Queen, the McDonald's.
Don't touch our Dairy Queen. Just saying, just saying.
Am I right? Am I right that there will be an intersection at Johnson and Clarence, like there is now plus one in between.
I don't know, it's just an
Now,
idea.
I'm just saying that you stop and then a block later you stop if you're in a car.
That sounds
I'm just not
more
sure how-
sensible.
It's, the whole Walgreens thing has just happened within the last
Month.
month at the most, so you guys didn't even know about it. So I'm just putting it on your radar that it might change your course of action. And Phelan is much wider going around than trying to manipulate a berm and a bridge and spending money on a bridge.
Although for Phelan, we might have to find this BCA parking solution because the BCA uses Phelan as their extended parking.
They should not do
Yeah,
on
they're
street
all
parking.
parking.
Right, well, if they had enough parking on site, they wouldn't need.
They
the park.
do.
They do have
to
tons
pay.
of parking on site at the BCA.
They
There's no
gotta
reason
pay.
for street parking. None, but they have to pay for their lot.
And there's the odd semi-trailers.
So anyway, there you go. See, there's the Walgreens. There's no one in the parking lot. It's empty.
I can respond to that if you can hear me.
Yes.
So we did look at going on Phelan. But right now the bus stop at Clarence and Maryland is the busiest bus stop on the east side. The number of pedestrians that are crossing the street at Clarence and Maryland far exceed anything else in the entire corridor. So, we're not totally set on building a bridge over Johnson Parkway. The berm that is there right now is existing from the railroad. We could potentially build that roadway at grade, but the H line is also an arterial BRT that's going to be coming down Maryland roughly around the same time as Purple Line, and the H line is planning their station at Clarence and Maryland, and they're pretty set on having it there. They've done a lot of research. They feel like that's the best spot. So, we're just we're just planning stations along Maryland where they were hoping to have stations along Maryland.
But isn't that a problem for car traffic though, to have a stoplight at Johnson, a stoplight at Clarence and one in between?
The stoplight at Clarence would only go once every 10 minutes once every 5 minutes, I suppose, for a bus. That's all that stoplight is for right now, unless Ramsey County decides to extend the Bruce Vento Trail alongside the guideway. That's kind of up in the air with this change in direction or this potential change. So, that signal is not going to change all that frequently. It's only for buses
The one at the berm,
at Clarence and Maryland.
but there's someone
Mhm.
going back and forth to push the button.
If the trail goes, that would be a pedestrian crossing. If the trail does not go across there, it would not.
Thanks for pointing out about the Walgreens. I hadn't seen that yet, so that's helpful to know. And thanks, Sarah, for jumping on. Sarah's our design and engineering manager who has some family activities. Are you outside right now, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm dropping my daughter off at basketball. Sorry.
Okay. Well, thank you for listening in and helping answer the technical questions. I think should we continue on our video?
Please.
So now we're passing the BCA and the new Bank of America. And you can kind of see here, this is where the roadway starts to transition to a more typical 4-lane section. So there's no more dedicated left turn lanes for the rest of the corridor as we approach White Bear Avenue. There's also, this is similar to, we looked at, I believe it was, is this Etna Street or is the last one Etna Street? But there's 2 offset intersections that happen, or 2 offset T intersections. I'll just go back a little bit to look at that again. But these two offset T intersections, things like this tend to be a little bit unsafe for turning vehicles and for pedestrian crossings. So we're evaluating potentially adding medians through intersections like this to allow for safer pedestrian crossings and restrict left turning movements in and out of those side streets to improve safety. So that's one improvement, one safety improvement we're looking at as part of our analysis.
Would that be known also as a turn in, turn out type of?
Yes, these intersections would become, or yeah, these side streets would become right in, right out.
And as you probably noticed right here, we didn't stage this. It looks like a kind of a near accident. I know you all and myself from growing up in this corridor have witnessed a lot of the like. So I think it was just coincidental and pretty reflective of the current conditions out here.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So now as we approach Hazelwood Street, this is also a proposed station location. You can see that the corridor is kind of turning from more commercial to more residential. There's a few apartment complexes, but there's a lot of single family houses as we continue east. There's also the fire department right here that as we're evaluating like what intersections it might make sense to add those protected pedestrian median crossings, that we ensure that we're not impacting any emergency vehicle operations or anything critical like that, and that we're engaging those stakeholders. I think that's part of what Liz is going to talk about too.
When I went on the walk, actually on the street, we were told that the sidewalks also have to be widened, and that will likely remove a lot of the boulevard trees.
I'm sorry, the sidewalks widened on Maryland? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, that's what
we were told.
it was on Maryland. They're gonna follow the boulevard trees.
So again, we're really early on in the design process, but we are assuming that we are rebuilding from back of sidewalk to back of sidewalk, replacing with new sidewalk, possibly widening the sidewalk, rebuilding the boulevard space. So yes, we are assuming right now at this very early level of design that the boulevard trees are likely going to have to come out and be replaced. Just rebuilding the street itself would likely trigger that, because again, this is not a mill and overlay, it's a reconstruct. But the other thing too that provides opportunity, you see those overhead power lines off on the left-hand side of the street. We may have to put everything underground. Again, we're early in the design process, but one could assume that we may very well need to put any overhead utilities underground as part of this roadway reconstruction project.
So can you have a alternative for people who like the shade in a hot summer, which can reduce your bill by 40%?
They're gonna replace
the trees.
They're gonna replace. Why, I was told it was too narrow to replace them. Maybe.
It might be, they're gonna short, yeah, widen, either you widen the sidewalk or you
Right.
just keep it the same width and you plant a tree.
Right.
They have to,
Yeah, that is going to be a conversation that we'll need to have, obviously. We have gone out there this fall. One of the things we did, we surveyed all of the trees. We know the locations of all of them. We know the tree types, the tree health. All of that was done as part of our technical analysis and will be shared in the coming months.
5 years ago, they put those trees in.
Yeah, they're not full.
Only 5 years old?
They're
I
not
thought
bad.
there were lattice trees.
Some were, some aren't.
no,
No?
That one is a ladder.
those trees have been there longer.
Some of them have.
Some. Yeah.
That's a lot of trees.
closer to the armory, they're the
Yep.
younger ones, yeah.
are already 7 degrees hotter in the city.
Don't use
Because of
blacktop.
our concrete. And it's not gonna get-
Don't use blacktop. Right, stop using blacktop. They do down south.
So as we move east, I also just wanted to point out at Flandreau Street, which is this intersection, the city is evaluating adding a dedicated bikeway on Flandreau. So if that were to happen, then this would likely be an intersection where we would consider adding a median for pedestrian crossings as well as bike crossings. It's not set in stone, but we're working with the city on that.
Would that possibly look like a speed table? Or just a median?
I don't think that we're currently evaluating speed tables just because that would also slow down the bus. But it's not to say it's impossible.
And that
It would
came
kind
up-
of look like, there's the median crossings further west on Clarence. I think the furthest east one is the one at Duluth Street. It would probably look like that.
And it came up during our walks that Maryland and White Bear, bikes are not part of the picture on those streets. I mean, they're dangerous as it is, and this makes it less.
Would you
so.
like your
So
bike
if-
on like there?
I would not bike on.
I would ride.
Well,
Like driving.
no, there are people biking, because we saw them on the grass median. So they-
Correct. So I think that's part of like the reason why the city's evaluating a dedicated bikeway on Flandreau to make that a more clear and safe bike facility to encourage people to bike there instead of in mixed traffic.
But it's still
Yeah.
something for you folks, because some people are gonna want to get on their bikes, not just for recreation down Flandreau, but to get to these stores and places.
And to get to the bus.
So, right, so you need to mention bike in your plan and how it's gonna integrate with what the city is doing, instead of just stay away. Don't ride your bike.
So I know the city has the Capital City Bikeway Plan. So I know that they have other bike facilities in this area identified. I believe Arlington and Larpenteur are the other ones that are currently in that plan. So that would be your east-west connection from Flandreau to White Bear, at least your dedicated bike facility,
And
if
just so
that
you know,
helps.
we have about 10 more minutes on the agenda.
Okay, that is helpful. I think we should probably speed through the rest of this then. White Bear and Maryland is that intersection that we just passed through, and that would also be a station area. Some complicating factors of that station is that is also where H line turns from going northbound on White Bear to westbound on Maryland and eastbound on Maryland to southbound on White Bear. So trying to figure out how we can optimize those facilities, if we can share how that would work. And as we move north on White Bear, the right-of-way here is even a little bit more narrow than it is on Maryland. So it's a little bit tricky, but recognizing that it's mostly residential facilities and then with some sprinkled in commercial. Intersection of Ivy is what we're passing through right now. I think it's one of the only signalized intersections without a station proposed. And most of these side streets, while they're not offset T intersections, there's not a lot of through traffic just because no one really wants to cross White Bear without a signal. But, yeah.
Don't cross.
Generally, what we've been working with the city on is that in this segment here particularly, there's several unsignalized intersections between the station locations, and we're looking at one pedestrian refuge or crossing at one of those unsignalized intersections, generally between each pair of stations, so that you can cross safely at the signal, at the station locations, and at one intermediate point in between. At those locations, we would be basically converting one of those the streets into a right in, right out, with a concrete median across it, allowing for safe pedestrian access. So that's what we've been working with the city on in this area.
Yep, similar to what we were talking about in Maryland too. Same concept. So I stopped at Arlington because there's a proposed station location here as well. I'll just keep going unless there's questions. Maybe I'll jump ahead a little bit as we approach Idaho. So over here is the Hafner site or Gloryville development. And we're approaching the, yep.
What's that?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
In that lot with the food trucks around me.
Yeah,
Well, I've seen them 3 places. Oh, yeah.
Yep, that is where all the food trucks line up. And then we're approaching the intersection of Iowa Avenue, which is currently a signalized intersection. If we were to put a station at Idaho, we would propose to move the signal there because that helps us with our transit operations for the bus and also allows for safe pedestrian crossings. And we don't want 2 intersections back to back that have signals like that. They're too close.
Well,
And then as we approach Larpenteur, the section starts to get a little bit wider as it transitions into Maplewood. So this is where we would likely start to transition the section from side running to center running or whatever the section is proposed to be in Maplewood. So I think we're about done here. Any final remarks or questions before we move on?
Is there any lack of access to, on our walk with Move Minnesota, we've stopped in a lot of the businesses and they're pretty small in the St. Paul area, and they just have no concept of what's going on. It's people we talked on Saturday wasn't managers. But is there, how do you guys envision people getting from the right lane to the left or the left lane to the right and stopping at these small businesses there? Is that going to be better or worse?
So for the proposed cross sections that we have, one of the options is to take these 2 outside lanes essentially and turn them into transit lanes. However, because of the nature of the corridor, right turns in and out of those lanes would be permitted for vehicles. That's why we're calling them semi-exclusive. So anyone wanting to go into these businesses, for example, can get into the right lane and turn right, and then they can turn right out of the driveway and then merge back into the general traffic through lane. And same thing for turning right in and out of side streets. And then for turning left, you do have to stop in the general traffic lane. We are, as part of our traffic study, looking at signalized intersections. Is it necessary to add dedicated left turn lanes because of the change in configuration? So we're looking at that at all the signalized intersections.
And I think that question is probably a good transition. I know we have a couple visualizations that Allison's team were able to finish kind of right before the holidays. So if we want to look at those really quick, Allison.
Yeah.
I think that illustrates kind of what Allison was talking about, and show some of these shared bus lanes that we're calling semi-exclusive because they do include folks to access
Did we lose you or? Did we lose you? Hello?